Bullshit.
It's the No BS Marketing Show. I'm your host, Dave Mastovich. Our guest today is Tom Rodriguez of TR Industrial, a manufacturer's rep agency. He's also been the president of Bell Vernon's Travel Basketball Association and a key member of one of the top AAU programs in the region and throughout the state as a coach and administrative coordinator, social coordinator. Tom, when we were on the last part of the show before the break, you were trying to skirt your way around when you were a BSer, and we cannot allow a guest to not say when maybe they were the BSer because that. Bullshit. So have you thought about it? Do you have an instance where maybe you were the BSer?
I have not, Dave. I'm really struggling here. I'm hoping you can help me out.
I'm going to give him the one when he's a BSer. He's going to get mad. He can be very vindictive. So when he gets vindictive, we're going to shut him off because I'm the host. So
okay, let's go. I'm ready. Ready.
When he was a BSer was when we first started coaching together, and he knows I take my coaching very seriously, and I'm a little too uptight. So he's a good mix. He's helped me to calm down and not be quite as uptight. When we started coaching together, what would happen is there would be Coach Wood, Coach Gilmore, Coach Rodriguez, and myself. So we would all go up and say our piece, and he would go last, and he would refute everything the other three people said.
Okay, you got me there. You're right. Absolutely. You got okay. Thank you for bringing that up.
You were a BS.
I was the comic relief guy. Yeah, Dave. Yes, you're right. Every coach would give a very positive, a very positive way of ending the practice by some words of encouragement. How well we've done. And then, you're right, I would, and this was Dave, this was his management style, and I should have picked up on this. He was not big on the comic relief because it wasn't really called for at that instance. It was not like he was mad at the kids. Dave would want to end practice on a very positive note, leave them with something to go home with as to, how proud we were of the kids. And I would BS. Undermine that a little bit by throwing a little quip in there. It was not to take down or to.
That's diffusing.
Okay. Okay. Well, it was but no. I'll call it on myself. I'll call bullshit on myself because I knew that. It was not the way that Dave wanted to end practice. He was a structured kind of guy, and I knew that about him. And I proceeded to just throw in a little quip there. And it wasn't to undermine him. It was to keep the mood, loose and loosey-goosey, that kind of thing. But it just wasn't, it didn't fit into his practice plan, which, and again, I did know that this is the way he wanted things because, he had practice planned down to pee breaks for crying out loud. Every 5 or 10 minutes, there was a schedule to follow. And at the end, what he probably had in there, coaches say something positive. And it's not that I said something negative, but I would say something funny to relate to the guys. And again, I probably should have kept it at, listen, I am your friend, guys, but I'm also your coach. But they looked at me as, jovial, crazy Uncle T-Rod, and that did not fit into the Mass Solutions way. So yes, Dave, correct. I will call bullshit on that. Yes.
So I got my guest on the defensive, which is good because he's only telling half the story, but I'm going to let it go. I'm going to let it go because he's telling half the story. I'm going to let him paint this untrue picture. But I will say that he did become, I named him the crazy Uncle T-Rod, and then all the players, once I adapt to my team, and I adapted to the whole core group, and I said, that's going to be his role. But it was beyond that. But that's okay because I need to put you on the spot. You can't not give when you were a BSer. Everyone's been a BSer.
Right. That was a good one, Dave. Thank you for that.
Everyone's been a BSer. So let's recap his tool or tip real quick. Your tool or tip, go ahead over it again. You were talking about how to address it quickly, I think was your tool or tip in the last segment about when there's a challenging situation.
Well, actually, if there's a tool or tip, from my business experience, because we've talked enough about me and my business experience. If anybody's still going to be listening at this point after listening to me talk for this long, my tip would be nothing other than when it comes to marketing a business is you got to take a shot, and you got to be okay with failing. I would tell you that you'll sleep better at night having known that you took your shot, even if you failed, than to never having taken a shot. So that would be, and I don't understand the tool or tip, but that would be my tip to people that want to run their own business, or you're marketing yourself.
That's good. He's given us 2 tips that we're going to put on the show notes so that everybody can know, because the first tip was talking about when you have a difficult situation, he addressed it quickly and head on. And it was a difficult conversation. You and I were even talking about a couple of people that you and I are working with right now that are in their mid-20s who are afraid of delivering bad news. And so you were kind of pointing out that, which ties back to something we were talking about earlier today, that you have to be able to deliver bad news quickly. The quicker, the better. And his second part of his tip is taking the chance to do your own business and to do your own thing, whether it's your own business or to make the leap in your career, is to take the chance.
Absolutely. I mean, look at your career, Dave. I mean, I know enough about you that, you were, working with Mon Valley Hospital years and years ago when you weren't working for yourself.
Yes.
I mean, you were going, and the Mid-Mon Valley area is not a budding community. I mean, that's a community, an older community. With the hospital there had, really struggled to find an identity. I think they're there now, but that goes from back in your days, and you were doing for other companies what you decided to step out and take a chance and do for yourself.
Suzanne, do you remember when we did the first television commercials for Monongahela Valley Hospital, when we came up with All the Hospital You Need, and we taped the Belle Vernon cheerleader, and then the school board made us take the commercial down? She would be, that's 97, so she would now be like 30-something. She was probably like 17 in 97, so she'd be like, what, 37?
Probably. Yeah.
Wow. We got to try to find out who that was.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see if she's still
it's on the internet.
In Belle Vernon area.
I Googled something to that effect, and the newspaper article came up when the school board met and they voted that she couldn't be on there with the Belle Vernon thing, the logo. So we were going to white out the logo.
That's a shame.
It was a great commercial campaign. Suzanne, you did a nice job. So did Mark Falone. He actually shot it, one of our previous guests. What is your biggest marketing or messaging success? Is there a time at Kaufman's where there was a campaign that you thought was great, or maybe it was how you motivated those salespeople, or is it that your messaging around your own business has grown and now you think it's really successful and makes an impact? It could be a messaging campaign. It could be a marketing or sales campaign. It could be a branding idea that you had earlier in your career. What's your biggest marketing or messaging success?
I would say that in my experience, the difference is you. When all else is equal, unless you have, I was thinking about this on the drive down here, and when it comes to my business, my sales business, unless you have by far the greatest product that the customer has to have. For instance, like when it first came out with Gatorade in the early 1970s, mm-hmm. I mean, and there was no competition, so people had to have Gatorade, and they had no other choices, So now in today's day and age, when everything is so competitive, when everything else is equal, or even if it's not equal, you get your message across, by you. So the difference is why companies don't create their own marketing departments versus go to Mass Solutions. The difference is Dave Mastovich. So when
Suzanne, and Mike, and the 3 mics.
Mass Solutions is the difference. So in a competitive environment, in a competitive marketing environment, when things are equal or even close, even if the other brand has a leg up on you, customers and people identify with the people behind the brand. So the Mass Solutions brand is where it is because of Dave Mastovich, and you create the difference. The products, and for instance, in my business, a lot of the products that I sell are the same. The reason that I'm selling them and outselling the competition, is me and the relationships that I build. So that's my message. People are still the difference. The greatest advertising campaign in the world is still pretty good, but will the same people behind that advertising campaign continue to get the business if they're just a bunch, a bunch of, nobody sitting around, no personality, no marketing idea, aside from generating the ideas, they don't have they don't deal with people, I mean, people buy the people behind the brand, not just the brand. And Mass Solutions is the brand because of Dave Mastovich and company.
Well spoken from Tom Rodriguez, the principal of TR Industrial, a manufacturer's rep agency. Tom, it's time for you to keep calm and hit the bullseye. I'll ask you to choose between two marketing or messaging classics. You pick which one and tell me why, but you only have a few seconds to hit the bullseye. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
We always start with the same first one, and I know you've done a lot of research on the show.
I don't know about that.
Geico's gecko or the Aflac duck?
Geico's gecko.
And why?
I believe it's more subtle than the duck. I think the duck's a bit loud.
Okay.
A little bit over the top.
Good. The second one, because they both have their own brand, their own message, very different styles. So we're going to let you answer on two fronts for this next one. You can answer first from a messaging or branding standpoint. Then the second part you can answer about what they do, who you like better.
Okay.
Bird, magic.
Magic on both ends. Magic is catchier. Okay. And I believe magic was more relatable. Magic had, to me, a much more public-friendly personality.
Since it's the March Madness edition, we're incorporating some basketball, and they had the famous March Madness that we'll get into in a bit. Who do you think's the better player?
I believe Larry Bird was the better overall player. I believe Magic Johnson was tons better at marketing.
This next one goes back to our youth. Both amazing messages that are memorable years later. Evel Knievel or the $6 Million Man?
Evel Knievel.
Ooh. You have to defend this decision.
Well, I defend the decision because, I recall many of times reading the newspaper with the multitude of fractures and broken bones that Evel Knievel had in failed attempts to jump things he shouldn't have been jumping or leaping or crafting or no doubt about it. I love the $6 Million Man, but Evel Knievel was real. Those were real injuries from failed attempts. And as crazy as the attempts were, like I said earlier in the show, he took a shot.
What'd you think of the Bionic Woman?
Oh, gosh, she was hot.
The next bullseye, Jennifer Aniston or Angelina Jolie?
Jennifer Aniston. And again, I make that decision based on, I believe Jennifer is the more conservative of the two. So if it was a marketing campaign, Angelina Jolie. If it was personal preference, Jennifer Aniston.
Who do you think I'd pick on those two?
I think you would pick Angelina Jolie and regret it every second of the way.
You know me.
You would pick Angelina Jolie and talk about how you should have picked Jennifer.
Lay's Bet You Can't Eat Just One or Doritos for the Bold?
Doritos.
Okay. Why?
Doritos just seems to really put it out there. I think in their, and I haven't followed their campaigns as closely as you, obviously, but I think they do a better job of walking the line a little bit. I think Lay's is a little bit more conservative. And I think when you put money into an advertising campaign in today's day and age, you needn't really worry if you're walking the line a little bit. And I think Doritos is more willing to take a shot.
Good insights. Progressives, Flo, or Jake from State Farm?
Jake from State Farm. Yeah. Well, he's more relatable. It's just more relatable.
You always have to get a dig in at Coach Dean Gilmore. Dean being from Progressive.
Yeah. Well, no, I just, some advertising just really, and a lot of times, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, we're making a mad dash to somewhere, during commercials. But, and the other thing too, with the Jake from State Farm, that one registers because it seems to capture my attention each and every time, even though I know exactly that's how that the ad's going to play out.
The last one, again, both have a great brand, very different brand. We're going to take the brand first and then who you think performs better or who is the best in the world. Steph Curry or LeBron James?
Right now, the brand is still LeBron James. I mean, LeBron has been around longer. So, it's still a LeBron James branded world. I think Steph Curry is, the heir apparent. We were talking about this a little bit, over lunch on the way back to the studio here. Very, very difficult to compare the brands. Steph Curry and LeBron James, in my opinion, are completely different basketball players. Very difficult to compare what they do. If it were tennis, it would be easier because it wouldn't involve teammates. Similar to, we talked about, Bird or Magic. That's, I think, a great comparison, between two. Bird and Magic were very much different players. You look at them, and the reason I preferred Magic is, number one, I thought he was more people friendly, but number two, I thought he was truly more of an MVP type, one that guys kind of, sure, the Celtic players look to Larry Bird to take the big shot, but Magic Johnson, assumed the role of their leader. I mean, who else could go, in a pinch when, correct me if I'm wrong, Abdul-Jabbar was hurt.
Migraine.
Exactly. To play center. He was a rookie. Was he a rookie that year, right?
A rookie wins
to go and play center. This was a guy that was built to be a small forward or a big guard. Similar type of comparison like that. So to compare Curry and LeBron James, my answer is it's just too tough of a comparison. They are two completely different, albeit, now I don't know if you could call Curry potentially will be one of the NBA all-time greats. But even if he continues this way, and he is, it will be very difficult to make a comparison of him versus LeBron James.
Good insight. That's Tom Rodriguez of TR Industrial, who's also a part of one of the premier AAU programs in the region and has been the Bell Vernon Travel Basketball Association president and their all-time winningest and losingest coach. Since it's the March Madness episode of the No BS show, that's why we're focusing on some basketball. And he talked about in the bullseye Bird and Magic, and he chose Magic on both fronts. They go back to when the tournament was very different. So we're going to get into that in a minute. But first, I'm going to address a couple of these things. The interesting thing is that Bird and Magic had each other at the same time in their prime. Michael Jordan came on later when they were both tail end of their prime. So Michael never had a number two that was close to him. And Bird and Magic had each other.
I very much agree with that, yes.
And then Michael still doesn't have a number two that's really close to him. LeBron could be placed at number two now, maybe. And even from a branding standpoint, from a branding and messaging standpoint, LeBron is definitely far superior to Curry because Curry's a basketball brand. His commercials are all about basketball and drilling, whereas LeBron has far exceeded that, just like Michael Jordan. However, he still didn't get to the Michael Jordan level of the brand either. So it's just really interesting that on both fronts, LeBron won't ever get to quite that top pinnacle. And Michael is the one guy in all the sports that you can clearly say is the best of all time and still is. Where I agree to a large degree with you is it's difficult to compare Steph and LeBron. We as a society want to choose the person that's not physically bigger. So when Bird and Magic came along, it was so exciting for basketball because always before that was the 7-footers, Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain. So everybody wanted to say Bird and Magic were better than them. And then when Michael came on, who was a Bird and Magic on steroids as far as athleticism, I think most people are going to want to put Curry over him because his body is so much smaller. He's so much more of an everyman, even though he is 6'3", but he's more of an everyman compared to the 6'8" Adonis, who a lot of times does it on brute sheer strength.
I love that assessment. I do. I mean, Steph Curry is like 80% of really good high school players that are looking to play in college ball somewhere. LeBron James is like 5% of the guys. I mean, you look back at your high school career, I look back at mine, Dave, I would tell you that I didn't play against anyone anywhere close to LeBron's stature and size. Sure, you come up against, you know, a 6'9" or 6'11" lanky kid that might be decent at blocking shots and rebounding, but he wasn't very strong.
Wasn't very,
you know.
Yeah.
So,
or you had the big 6'8" guy who was thick but wasn't agile.
Right. That had just finished playing football. You know, so it's true. We don't see anything. You know, I don't want to say anything, but you don't often see in high school basketball the type of specimen that LeBron James was.
Yeah, he came out of high school and you were
still
like,
is.
This guy out of high school was
right.
And he's a guy that you could see him being an NFL player. You could see him doing anything.
Right.
So it is the March Madness episode. I'm with Tom Rodriguez, a basketball junkie like myself. I'm going to talk about March Madness from a basketball and a messaging standpoint. So the first thing is, how about this to our listeners under the age of 40? And the ones that actually live this would be more under the age of 55, 60. It used to be only a conference champion could go to the tournament. It's not that long ago. You're talking 65 through the early to mid 70s. You only had 16 teams going, and you were guaranteed as a conference champion. There were times when a team went 28-2 and lost to their conference champion twice and didn't get in the tournament. Then it grew to 48. And that's when you and I started watching, although you don't remember it, whenever Spanarkel and Duke lost to Kentucky. And then in 79, the Bird Magic was when it was 48. It expanded to 48, and Bird and Magic played when there were 48, and that's when it really started to become March Madness, because Bird and Magic played in the championship game, and it was this amazing contrast in two great players. And it wasn't just the black-white thing. It was more like what you said. One was charismatic and outgoing, and one was reserved and held back. One was a gazelle and amazing and passed and moved smooth. The other one looked clunky but could hit shots wherever. So it was this great, it's the pinnacle game of the NCAA tournament, from when you can draw a line of demarcation right there in 1979 from the tournament the old way to the tournament the new way. Is that tournament game between Bird and Magic.
I agree.
Then we go on to 85, the one you mentioned, and talk about why that resonates with you so much.
Well, part of the reason is that, you know, I remember watching the game with my father and my brother, and my father was a huge Georgetown fan at the time. You know,
wow,
no particular reason, but he just loved the Georgetown team. And I, even as a kid, you know, I favored the underdog, you know, and you know, that was a great story. And Georgetown was not a team then that was easy to like. I mean, they were a collection of a lot of inner city kids. I mean, they had Patrick Ewing, I believe, at the time.
Graham.
Yeah, or right. I mean, so it wasn't a team
Reggie Williams,
that I could relate to.
Wingate.
Right. I mean, you know, I related to Jensen from Villanova. Uh-huh. You know, the slow white kid that could shoot the lights out. You know, I mean, that's who I related to. You know, and you know. John Thompson was seen as, you know, very much a disciplinarian, you know, big, strong guy, no nonsense, that type of thing, a great coach for that team. But Raleigh Massimino had a little bit of character to him. You know, I mean, his shirt was untucked. It was sticking out from underneath his jacket. The tie was loose and dry. I mean, you know, it was, and I just recall that, you know, it was a household divided. And we're watching that game. I was in high school at the time, and you know, it's just a game that resonated with me.
Villanova shot 78%, folks, when 50% is good. And the Georgetown team in that 5-year period, think about this. They lost to Houston the one year. No, they beat Houston the one year. They lost to Nova. They lost to Carolina when Ewing was a freshman.
Right.
And then they were upset when North Carolina State won it. So in a 4-year period, they were flat out dominant, and they were scaring people because they were hip-hop, the beginning of hip-hop. They got the shoes. They had the attire. They did everything. And you had a segment of the population that was afraid of them. They just beat people, and they beat people's asses. They intimidated people. And they had a brand.
Right.
The other part is, it just hit me that the person, if I had to say who is the person that I think is like you as a coach, it'd be Raleigh Massimino. Is that
a compliment?
Yeah, he's a guy that I think gets the most out of his guys. He's upbeat.
Gray hair.
He gets the game. He's strategic, but not too strategic. He's not going to worry about too many plays and stuff.
No, that's me. You got me there. You got me there. I'm not a plays guy.
He's not going to use too many baseline out of bounds plays.
No, he's not. He's not.
Raleigh will get mad at us and hear this and say that we were kind of crazy. So what we got is that's 85. I do have to touch on one of the most important ones to me. It's the day that I realized I was going to coach basketball, and it's when my mom and I, because my dad was at the VFW, and my brother was off to college, and I was probably about 15 or 16, and it's the North Carolina State Jim Valvano run.
Absolutely.
And so during that whole run, I kept watching him, and I watched how he was inspiring people, and it just touched me. And I remember that night I said to my mom, I said, I'm going to coach basketball.
Wow.
That's when I said it to my mom.
Well, I wasn't thinking about coaching then, but now I have, as I get older, and now that ESPN does the 30 for 30s and everything, and they have the story of that. When you watch that 30 for 30, that's like one of those one of those movies that when it comes on, you just can't turn it off.
Exactly.
That 30 for 30 is like that. I mean, because I was, still pretty young at the time. I didn't realize, because again, it was before the days of ESPN and extended television coverage and all that. I mean, how impressive that run really was.
They were down and out in games by 8 points with 2 minutes to go, and the games were tape delayed.
That first round game that they played against Pepperdine.
Pepperdine game.
They were out on the West Coast. Games were on tape delay. They were dead to rights. They were down 10 with a minute to go in the first game.
Who was the Pepperdine coach? Went on to fame.
Paul Westphal.
Herrick.
Jim Herrick. Yes, he was. UCLA.
Ended up winning at UCLA.
But that, especially with that 30 for 30 story, that story over time just keeps getting better.
It's amazing. It's just an incredible story. Then you had the reason that March Madness is today, for the people that are listeners that love March Madness, just for the brackets and the advertising and so forth. Here's why it happened. 79 Bird Magic, 82 Jordan hits the shot at the buzzer to win it over Georgetown. 83 is the Valvano story. 84 is Akeem Olajuwon and Georgetown. And 85 is Villanova upsets Georgetown.
Yeah.
Then then a few years later, you have the Danny Manning story. So you have that whole 80s of where it built this platform.
Right.
And now, though, let's talk about how it's grown through the 90s, through the aughts, and today, that it's such a part that it's actually bigger than the Super Bowl from an advertising standpoint, because it's longer. It's not one day, but talk about it.
Well, the one thing that triggers a memory there, I was watching the 30-30 the other day on the Fab Five. Okay. And the one thing that stuck out from being a marketing guy is, in the years there, I'm kind of sketchy. We're talking 90s now.
91,
okay.
92, yeah.
So now we're getting into the 90s. And when you watch that 30 for 30, the Michigan players start talking about, because what was the booster that got into trouble for handing them a lot of money?
Yeah.
Okay. But they start talking about, especially Jalen Rose, who's a pretty prominent, now in the spotlight, because he still does ESPN or whatnot. He's on the networks. And a lot of it was, they're talking about how, we feel like the university has benefited by marketing us, and we're not, and, we're poor as could be. And so there was a discussion in that 30 for 30 about marketing. And the one thing that stood out from that 30 for 30 episode is they talked about the Michigan players. Okay. They wanted to send a message, and the message they sent, they started wearing black socks.
I remember
which
that.
was unheard of.
Yes.
Unheard of at the time. So, Jalen Rose and his classmates decided, well, we're going to send a message, because up until that point, all the sweatshirts, the T-shirts, whatever, all in the likenesses of these players. And the players, the university was marketing the players and reaping the benefit. And the players, weren't seeing, they weren't seeing any of that, which to me, I still believe that, you are getting the benefit of a college scholarship, which to most people is worth tens upon thousands of dollars. Now, they didn't look at it that way,
right.
but in essence, that's what's going on. But, so they decided to go with the black socks, because guess what? The university couldn't market that and make any money on it, because every grandfather in America was wearing black socks with his loafers, So
now they were common for 20 years because of those guys.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think it started in the 90s, and technology, has helped, marketing in leaps and bounds.
The Fab Five were great for a number of reasons. They were obviously great teams to get to the finals twice, but they were authentic. And that's a big thing about marketing and storytelling, is we gravitated towards them because they were authentic, and they built a brand with the long baggy pants and the black socks and the other stuff they wore. They were authentic, though. They were the younger kids that were just truly having a fun together. And that's what we kind of want. If you look at the teams that have been popular over the years, the Bears of '85 were so popular all those years later, 30 years later, anniversary team, because they were fun. You remember the Fridge, you remember Crazy McMahon and McMichael, and that's what the Fab Five was. They were very much authentic,
and they were related to, but by a lot of kids like them, a lot of great college high school players. I mean, to see, and that and they came in as freshmen, so and they were able to be related to. Plus, they were a pretty savvy group. I mean, Jalen Rose was a pretty well versed kid and pretty good in front of the microphone back then. They all weren't. I mean, Juwan Howard did a pretty lousy job of it, but Jalen Rose, he kind of took to the mic, so he kind of helped build that brand.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they're going to go down in college basketball history for guys like you and I that really know it, they didn't win anything. But they started the branding process, really taking the branding process in college basketball to another level. Similar to, and now, we're into the, to the 2000s, so it's taken it to a whole other level. But what I find most, fascinating from a marketing perspective is when you look back at it all, and even today, the same brands, that were popular in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s are still popular today. There's been new growth, like Michigan. I mean, Michigan football was known for but Michigan basketball, it did not have a brand until the Fab Five. But and now that we're in 2016, I would tell you that there's still probably opportunity for other universities, to build their brand a little bit more, because when you look at it, I mean, you ask people, you ask someone that doesn't know basketball, hey, who can you name the best basketball team from a marketing perspective in the country? They're going to name Kentucky, they're going to name North Carolina, they're going to name Duke, but they're not going to go much past 3, 4, or 5 brand names.
That's Tom Rodriguez, the principal of TR Industrial, a manufacturer's rep agency, and a basketball junkie like myself. This was your March Madness edition of the No BS Marketing Show. Tom, if our listeners want to connect with you, how can they reach you? What's your contact info?
Wow, you can.
You want to give them LinkedIn, Twitter? I know you're on.
I'm not on any of those.
T-Rod.
I'm not on any of those. They can contact me through your office, since now that I have all the gear, I'm doing some part-time consulting free of charge. Or you can email me anytime.
Anything to say about Mass Solutions AAU basketball?
Wow, what an experience! It breaks my heart. I only have one son, and he now is going to be a senior in high school. So my AAU basketball experience with Mass Solution, unfortunately, has to come to an end. Unless, Dave, you want to
No, I
adopt
want
a couple
you to
girls.
coach. You can coach.
No, it's been a fantastic experience. It's sad to see the days go.
It's amazing. Remember when Joey and Alec were in 4th grade? Joey Mascaro and my son Alec, and we had that first team. Oh my. Talk about going back in time. Thanks for being on the show, Tom.
Hey, I appreciate you having me. I had a blast.
Hey, you were another great guest, and it was our basketball edition. And thank you, our listeners. For show notes, go to Bold Solutions No BS. You'll find the show notes and other marketing and messaging resources. Sign up for light reading. Go to masssolutions.biz and get light reading that comes out every other week. It really is light, intended to be read in 2 minutes or less, and it just might trigger bright ideas for you. Remember, ask yourself, what's the big idea? Answer that question and build your messaging around it. It's all about bold solutions.